Hey everyone, and welcome to Beaming Notes. And today we're going to take a look at the critical analysis of the poem The Patriot, An Old Story by Robert Browning. Critical analysis. Written in a form of a dramatic monologue, The Patriot, An Old Story by Robert Browning is an account of a man's fall from power to disgrace. One gathers that the poem is about an individual. On the other hand, the subtitle, An Old Story, can be deciphered as it is a universal story that can be applicable to anybody. This is in line with the contrast that is projected in the poem. The first stanza begins with the description of the patriot's arrival into the town and the magnificent welcome given to him by the townspeople. His path has been laden with roses and fragrant myrtles, and people are clambered on their rooftops to catch a glimpse of and congratulate the patriot. The past tense used in the first stanza creates a retrospective narrative. It has been implied that the town is a very cluttered and old one. Old walls rot. In the second stanza is an evidence to this. The poet has religious beliefs, and this can be seen in the first and second stanza, where he mentions churches and bells. Also, the last stanza has him reaching out to God's safe haven for justice. But the patriot is shown as a man who values permanence more than temporary glory. This is reflected in his asking the townspeople to fetch him the sun, as it is the ultimate symbol of power, glory, and immortality. True to the title of the poem, the patriot himself fetches the sun for his beloved friends, but it is then that regrets enter his tone. His feeling of betrayal is quite clear when he mentions about, despite his good deeds, what he is reaping. A year has run signifies that something eventful has taken place through the 1 year which has had some adverse effects. This is when he starts narrating the current scenario. The mood of the poet changes to sarcastic and ironical as he draws a contrast by juxtaposing the full roofs in the past with the present empty ones. The fickle nature of the townspeople can also seem as the same people who were celebrating the patriot are now gathered near the gallows to cheer his execution. To emphasize on the patriot's emotions, his walk of shame is described where the patriot comments on the transitory nature of man, who might love today and hate tomorrow. Despite the sorrowful tone of the poem, one notices that Browning ends the poem on a note of optimism, as he hopes that regardless of the misunderstanding and evils contaminating the world, God always does justice, and it is in death that patriot will be granted what he truly deserves and will rest peacefully in God's safe haven. This is also an example of the faith he places in God and religion. Poetic devices. Pathetic fallacy. I go in the rain. The rain here is symbolic of a number of things. The patriot gets wet by the rain, losing his dignity. Also, it can be viewed that the rain washes him clean, representing his innocence. The rain also works to create a tense atmosphere. Juxtaposition. The image projected in the beginning of the poem is juxtaposed with the current scenario. This can be seen when the rooftops were swaying with people in the first stanza, but in the fourth stanza, it is empty. This shows how the patriot went on from becoming loved to hated. This effect works in creating a contrast, which is actually the central idea of this poem. Alliteration. Roses, roses, myrtle mixed, crowd and cries, drop down dead. This use of alliteration adds rhyme and rhythm to the poem. Metaphor. The use of roses in the first stanza has been to symbolize people's love and affection towards him. The celebratory attitude of the people and their honoring the patriot has been metamorphosed as roses. Glory, power, and immortality have been metamorphosed as the sun. He asked the men for the sun, as it is the ultimate symbol of power. And you see my harvest, what I reap. In this line, the patriot's deeds have been referred to as harvest, and the consequences have been metamorphosed as reaping. Personification. The house roofs seemed to heave and sway. The roofs of the houses have been given the human characteristic of heaving and swaying. This has been done to refer to the crowd on the roofs and their frenzy on seeing the Patriot, which is causing them to clamber over each other and give an impression of swaying. Imagery. The poem begins with an image of the past where the Patriot is being welcomed back to his town with paths laden with roses and myrtles. The use of roses projects a positive picture as they symbolize love. The heaving rooftops are evidence to the fact that the town is a very cluttered and crowded one. They create a contrast between the past and the present. The image of crowded rooftops is juxtaposed with the image of empty rooftops and roads. Rain acts as a negative agent as it creates a scene of misery and works in changing the mood of the poem. The Patriot is walking through the town and is bleeding and in pain. The reference to safety in God's abode ends the poem on an upbeat note as the imagery is of positivity and optimism. Form and structure. Rhyme scheme. With 6 stanzas, each consisting of 5 lines, The Patriot by Robert Browning has a rhyme scheme ABABA. This makes this poem a Sicilian quintain. This poem has an iambic pentameter. Theme. The Patriot is majorly based on the theme of rising and fall of fortune. The narrator, the Patriot, is welcomed with feverish joy and paths of roses in the first 2 stanzas by the townspeople. But by the end of the poem, we see that those same people have humiliated and executed him within a year. This shows that glory and fortune did not last forever. People are fickle-minded and change their opinions without a second thought. Someone who is loved today may easily be hated tomorrow. The people has undertones of religiosity. The first stanza itself mentions flags fluttering on the church spires. Also, the Patriot is welcomed with ringing bells. The final stanza has the Patriot being optimistic about death as he believes that God does justice to one and all, and he will recognize that the Patriot has done nothing immoral. This faith in God and the belief that he will be safe in God's abode shows that a Patriot is a religious man. Also, there is a biblical reference when the poet mentions the reaping of the harvest. Betrayal is also a minor theme in the poem, and the poet fetched the son for the townspeople, and in return, they stamped him as a criminal and executed him. All his good deeds were forgotten, and he was brought to a humiliating and painful death. Tone. Narrated in a first-person account, the Patriot has an ironic tone. The irony in the poet being that the people who had, in the beginning, welcomed him with flowers, they are the ones who stone him and hang him within the span of a year. The poem begins with a retrospective tone, since the first 2 stanzas are in the past tense. The poet reflects back upon the days when he was welcomed with rose-laden paths. Then there is tension in the narration when the poet mentions the now empty rooftops. The Patriot's tone becomes laced with agony and sarcasm when he notes how the people who apparently were ready to worship him are now cheering his execution. The poet ends on an optimistic note as the Patriot believes that God truly knows who is moral or immoral, and he will do justice to the Patriot after his death.